With over half of enterprise security budgets going towards detection and response in 2020, the challenge is investing in solutions that can migrate and scale with your business. ExtraHop helps security teams spot threats up to 95% faster and respond 60% more efficiently in hybrid and multi-cloud environments with cloud-native network detection and response. Kick the tires in the full product demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. Join the Security Weekly mailing list for webcast virtual training announcements and to receive your personal invite to our Discord server by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe and click the button to join the list. And if you want to see all the upcoming webcasts, visit securityweekly.com/webcasts. We've got Learn How to Create and Run a Conference from some of the geniuses behind Layered 8 Conference and Wild West Hacking Fest on August 19th. Our next technical training on August 27th will teach you about Boothole, SIG-RED, and SMB Lead, best practices to prioritize and remediate. And ExtraHop is September 10th. We're going to talk extending the enterprise network to the remote worker, but we don't have that graphic up yet. All right. So, gentlemen, we have not covered articles in a few weeks. We didn't do it during Black Hat. We were off last week. I had a lot to choose from, but pulled in a few interesting articles this week that I thought would be a good conversation with Jason back in the saddle.
Back in the saddle.
Yeah. So this first article I pulled in is CISOs say new problem-solving strategies required.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, obviously there is a shift going on here with where security controls are moving to.
Yep.
And this article says, look, sometimes we need to think about the problems differently. And I've been saying this for years, is that we got to think differently about some of this stuff. And so this article highlights some of those interesting areas to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, CISOs are worried about, obviously cyber criminals taking advantage of the disruption in business and life and pretty much everywhere. I mean, they're opportunistic, right? So, CISOs out there in the industry are like, all right, we're going to start seeing more cyber attacks. We know they're going to be taking advantage of the disruption that everybody's seeing in the business. How do we become better strategists for the organization and get that seat at the table with the board, the CEO, and really start changing the dynamic of the conversation? Because it's very important. We're in the midst of a massive shift, I think, right? I mean, organizations are taking a look at remote workforce that's been successful over the course of how many months now, and now they're seriously, and we're seeing some of the larger companies do it already, seriously looking at making this the model for the future. Why do we have these huge buildings, this real estate in New York, these 60,000 square foot buildings that have 500, 600 people in them, when we've been operating successfully for the last 6 months, right? That you're going to see organizations starting to dump real estate and having this become the normal.
But what's interesting? We haven't, as far as the data that I've looked at, by all means, if you have data that shows otherwise, I'd love to take a look at it. But what is specifically the Internet Report from Rapid7 and Todd Beardsley's team didn't show a huge shift in attacker techniques. It didn't show a huge shift in the exposure of devices on the internet. Largely not a huge shift, right? I mean, there's still stuff hanging out there that's vulnerable, but we didn't see a drastic change in attacker behavior or the vulnerability landscape on the internet, which is good. Sure. We're all doing our jobs, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully it stays that way and we can stay ahead of the problem. I don't know that I have seen or will see like a drastic change in attacker behavior. It might be a slow
that's
kind of
what I'm more worried
crawl
about
over time.
And,
right?
and again, I'm more worried about the human factor, right? Because my finance team, they're normally in four walls. They're not remote.
Right.
HR teams, they're normally in the four walls. They weren't remote. Now that entire team is remote. That the folks who are not the technologists, that are not the security experts, getting fished. I'm more worried about that than anything.
You know what's interesting, though, from a physical security perspective, any attack that requires physical, working from home, I think provides us an advantage, right? As an attacker, and I've done physical pen tests before, I can go to one building, and that's where all the juicy secrets are. That's where all the users are that I may want to attack.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to implant anything, leave something behind for people to pick up, do some kind of monitoring, I'm going to focus on your corporate headquarters. Better yet, maybe a remote office where there's multiple people, and I can very easily find where those places are. In fact, they may tell me where those are and say, I want you to target this building or that building, right? Now let's move into a model where everyone's working from home. What am I going to do? Roll up in someone's neighborhood? I mean, an attacker might, right? But it's a little bit more investigation to figure out where those users are.
But then add on top of it the dynamic of the home network too.
Yes.
That's another issue, right?
Yes.
Now we have this remote workforce in a home network, flat network. We literally just had this conversation about IoT and IoT vulnerabilities,
but it still takes my targets and it spreads them out across the globe. Whereas, the printer example, if I'm an attacker, I'm going to target the printer in your corporate headquarters, right? Because that's where I'm going to have the most success. Now all your users are working from home across the world. All right, which user am I going to target? And I'm only going to get their print jobs, right? So it really has to be worth it for me to find out where that user lives, find out their their email address, and attack their network specifically, because now their network is unique to all the other thousands of users that are out there. Whereas before they were on the same common network. Yeah, I'm saying it's different.
It's different. It's different.
And there's certainly techniques that people are going to use, attackers are going to use to find people at home and exploit things, right? But I think the ubiquitous nature of where and how people work now could also be an advantage to defenders.
It could, but
we'll
I think my concern is the attacks don't necessarily need to change. The problem is, how do I extend some of my enterprise security controls to the remote worker force?
Agree 100%, Matt, right?
That's the strategy shift that I think this article is trying to talk about.
Because I email a user to get in. It doesn't matter whether they're at home or whether they're in the court. They got a VPN. You know what? I've interviewed pen testers in the past, and they're like, you know what? It doesn't matter whether their email's in the cloud or whether it's local. I'm going to target the user with an email. I'm going to ride on top of their credentials, and now I have access to the directory, and I'm off to the races, right? And that has not changed. In fact, it could be worse because, like Matt said, now your enterprise controls aren't
there to protect.
And the technology to be able to do that, I think, is going to win, right?
Yeah, and that ties into this next article, titled very interestingly, 2 CISOs pay $400,000 for security, yet one spends 10 times more. How? Cyber Risk Alliance did this little survey and research on this, and it was talking about the reactive versus the proactive control spend and the potential issues with getting a breach. If you're not spending enough money on the right controls, you're both spending the same amount of money, but on different types of controls, it could lead to a breach, and the breach is the 10xer here, right? So again, organizations have to think about budgets and where are they putting the priority on the spend, tying back to the previous article to say, can we be a little more proactive with some of these controls and put us in a better position not to be breached?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been of the mindset of the proactive approach, right? I mean, that's always the stance that I've taken. No matter what. I mean, look, you can look at anything and say if you're reactive, obviously it's going to cost more money. I mean, look at the way over time governments have managed their buildings, right? For example, they take a reactive approach. They kick the can down the road, and now they have to replace, multi-million-dollar schools every 20 years because they're falling apart. Right. They're not doing the proactive maintenance, right? They do the deferred maintenance side. So they take that reactive positioning to managing that stuff. It's the same in managing anything within the business, right?
Or
where
managing
if
your
you're
house
deferring
too.
that and managing your house, if you're deferring that out, it's going to cost more money in the end, honestly, right? I mean, that's not to say you don't want to invest in the things like detecting and responding. Of course you do, but having that proactive approach where you're looking at risks and you're looking at threats and you're looking at that risk management, I think is a good idea. It's a proactive idea, and I think it saves you more money in the long term.
Yeah, it definitely does. This ties into my next article. A lot of these tie together. How remote work is reshuffling your security priorities and investments. And the winners are identity and access management, endpoint detection response, cloud security, mobile device management, and data leakage prevention.
Hey.
Are we surprised by any of these?
It's all the things we want to make sure that we're being proactive to manage that remote workforce. Who would have thought?
Right.
Who would have thunk it? But it does hit on a couple things, I've been saying for a long time.
Yeah.
App user data, app user data.
Identity.
Yeah, I think we've been moving in this direction for some time, and now there's just, we need to get there more quickly.
Yeah. It's lighting a fire.
Really, just to summarize the past few months, it's basically, in IT, it's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think identity is one of those challenge areas. This next article talks a little bit about trying to tackle some of those challenges. I'm curious, Jason, how much of this article resonated with you on the identity and access management side? Because it is a challenge. This one talks about multinationals, but even a large organization.
And I mean, identity, we got to think about it this way. It's not just your employees, right? It's your employees, it's your contractors, it's your third-party vendors, it's anybody who needs remote access in. Hey, by the way, it's your devices that need service accounts. It's IoT, right? It's all of those devices that need some level of...
It's your applications.
It's your applications, right? So it's like... it can be such a mind-boggling exercise to go through and really be good at it. That's the key, right? But you guys say it all the time. It is one of the key components that we need to leverage to make sure we're being proactive. Yeah.
Now, does it make sense because identity's gotten so much more complex? Do you roll your own, or do you look at one of these potential, identity as a service platforms to try to offset some of that complexity for you? Where's the value between rolling your own and using some of these managed type services?
For me, I guess it's yet to be determined, but I always sit back and say, can I do it as well as a company who focuses on it 24/7 and they're a quality company, right? So I'm very interested in the managed service side of the aisle, right? I started digging in because of this article a little bit more on that identity fabric. I think if you can partner with a great company, you also have to have your A game. You have to bring your A game, right? Because you need to be able to identify within your organizations the users, the targets, the applications, those service accounts, all of those, and come up with that holistic approach. Build that identity fabric so you can map the right tools to it. I am very interested in as a service, though. I really am.
Because it ties into user experience. And I've seen...
That's a big piece of the puzzle, right?
Oh, my God. I've seen firsthand how it can just go horribly wrong. If you mess this up and people are calling into the help desk and can't do their jobs, as they very well could be because 100%. My multi-factor needs to be reset, or I can't get this device to work now because there was an update.
Or what? If the experience sucks, I'm going rogue.
Yes, exactly.
That's the other last thing we want.
It's not just the inconvenience.
That is the last thing we want.
I'm just going to go rogue and bypass it.
That's right. Yep. So, yet to be determined. But if there's a player in the game that can do it well, I would argue that my internal team's not going to be able to build something like that and manage it and be able to administer it and keep it up and keep it a solid platform.
Right.
And now when we think about remote work and in this very highly distributed environment, having somebody that can offer that service that's outside of your network so you don't have to have everything inside is probably another advantage to the way we're going to work going forward.
100%. I mean, there's so many different pieces of this, right? And hey, let's not forget that that experience needs to take into account legacy applications too. So it has to be hybrid. Right, it just can't be identity to your SaaS applications and your as a service apps and things of that nature. It has to tie into it has to be a hybrid approach. Has to tie into all your legacy systems too.
Yep. That's most often why people will need to work remotely is because there are legacy systems they need to interact with.
That's right.
And that's most often we have to jump through more hoops to get there because you're accessing the internal network.
Yep. And to be honest with you, I don't see it as a quick journey into, identity as a service, that managed service. I think it's going to be a journey.
Yeah.
I think it's number one going to be a lot of planning for your organization to get there.
So many users, so many different devices, and so many different applications, and so many different aspects of identity in terms of how do you deal with the role in the account, how do you deal with the multi-factor, how do you deal with the VPN aspect, how do you deal with the mobile device management aspect, which is yet another kind of thrown into the mix aspect of it. It's just
And then you have to think about outside access, from the inside to the outside and the outside to the inside, right? So you have to be managing a bimodal, right, both ways.
Yeah, exactly right. This next article, how to make your security team more business savvy. Obviously we've talked about the need for security professionals to really understand the business, be integrated into the business and understand that business aspect. And you've done a lot of work, obviously, where you are, Jason, in doing a lot of that. And I think the steps here make a lot of sense. Any thoughts on different steps in this article's
I think the steps are dead on, but I think it's the responsibility of us as leaders to get our folks engaged and experienced in it, right? So, one of the first ones is
couldn't put it any better myself. That's exactly my thoughts when I saw the article.
Lead by example, right? That's the first one. Well, guess what? In order for you to lead by example, that means you need to start bringing some of your team into these meetings so they can learn from you, right? They can learn how to interact with other executives and how to interact from a business unit perspective. We have the responsibility to get them the exposure there so they can start learning how how the business operates, right? It's up to us to level our folks up, and that's the key. I loved one of the things that was in there about creating a role. It was a BSO role, right? A business information security officer, where you're tied to a line of business, right? And you're learning how that line of business, that business unit operates. So you would have a BSO attached to maybe the finance team, right? You'd have that security stakeholder embedded in the business unit to learn the business unit.
Well, and I think it's important for the teams to understand why they're doing something, and understanding the business concept is going to give them that, and I think it's up to the leaders of those teams to make sure it's constantly reinforced, right?
Absolutely.
So the teams don't feel like they're just working towards a goal just for the sake of it, that it is aligned to the business, and the leaders of those teams need to constantly make those connections.
Right. And to be honest with you, the only way to get that situational awareness on truly how those business units operate is to be embedded with that business unit. That's the only way to learn. Yeah. That's the only way to learn.
Sure, you could have the CEO or whatever stand up and give a quarterly briefing or whatever, but it
doesn't give you that.
The tip of the iceberg for the leaders of those teams to go, this is what it really means for us, and constantly reinforcing it. Right.
And hey, by the way, once you start building that relationship with the business unit, they're going to tell you the dirty secrets that are hidden in the closet.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yes. Because now you have that relationship, and they're going to say, we kind of tout it this way, but this is how it really works.
Yeah. This is how we really do it here, because really that one under the covers is really horrible. Let me show you.
We never told you about this shadow IT application.
Yes. So true.
Yeah, it's the same conversation you have with auditors, right? It's like, of course we do it this way.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't.
But honestly, that's how security teams have been viewed over the years, right? I mean, they haven't been viewed as a business enabler. They've been viewed as the auditor, right? And that's that. We talk about it all the time. We need to shift that perception of security. We're here to enable the business, help the business.
Oftentimes, when there's a security problem, there's other operational problems that you can help solve in there as well, right? We were talking about FTP. In fact, Jeff mentioned it in there. And there's a lot of processes that were, moving data around via FTP. And not only is that a security issue, but at points in my career, I've been like, there's also like this fails a lot too. Not a lot, but like there's failures in this process. And they're like, like sometimes the file doesn't make it, sometimes this and the other thing. Applying security to that problem also inherently a lot of times fixes those other issues, right?
Or at least connect some dots, right? Because now you have the security person saying, hey, wait a minute. I fixed your security issue, but I'm understanding you're having a process or a technology issue.
Yes.
I have the peeps for you. Hold on. Let me hook you up with my counterpart over here.
One fell swoop,
right? So let's bring in, Joe, and he can come help with the performance issue or the process issue.
Now we've got an API. Now we've got a secrets manager. Now we're getting better logs and telemetry and automatically recovering from common failures, right? But we also fixed the clear text FTP issue as well.
And now security is a business enabler because guess what? We fixed the gamut of the problems. We were kind of
we picked a problem that's pretty easy for not all of them align that maybe align that well, but it's a good example.
A lot of instances that's how it goes though, right? And if you have that good relationship within your organization, and the same thing goes for traditional IT, right? If you have a good relationship with IT, they're going to come back and say, "Ooh, we found the security issue. Come on in here."
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Next article: How to prepare for a difficult conversation you can't have in person.
Yep.
This is tough these days.
It is what it is these days. You do the best you can.
It's funny. I talk to executives, and they're making hiring decisions, and they've never met the person. They've never met them face to face. The entire interview process, everything has been done remotely.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. So we know the whole hiring process is done that way.
Oh, God, yeah.
What happens on the other side of the equation when there's an issue, right?
Yeah.
How do you prepare for those conversations when you can't have it face to face? So this article kind of gives you some tips. Look, it's still difficult.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's the same level of preparation I do for a face to face. I'm not going to change it just because the medium to deliver it is different. Always be on video. I mean, that's going to be, never on the phone, never on my cell, never on an instant message or something like that. Obviously, it'll always be as best face-to-face as we can possibly be, but it's similar strategy, right? I'm going to prepare for the conversation, right? I'm going to make sure that I'm going to bring my A game to the table, right? I'm going to make sure that, if it's a difficult conversation, I'm going to try to preemptively determine what any of the pushback would be, right? I'm going to think about my answers. I'm going to think about, if the conversation were to go sideways, how can I bring it back on track, right? So, a lot of the similar ways we would handle a difficult conversation in person, it's just being delivered in a different medium. And I understand people are not as comfortable with it, but it's going to be the way it's going to be the way of the walk here for a long time. So
it is,
if not forever.
Sure. Yeah, and I thought the last tip was kind of interesting. Is kind of vent first, right? Get some of that frustration out, so it's not there while you're having the conversation. You kind of already got it out.
Yep.
And it's a lot easier sometimes to do that venting remotely because there's nobody else around. It's not like you're going into a conference room or somewhere and you're like, trying to vent. Right. You can actually do that a lot easier remote to prepare yourself to be a little more cool and calm during that video conference.
Yeah, and I mean that's a strategy that goes old school, right? I mean, snail mail, write a letter, don't send it to the person, and vent. Then once it was email, all of it, write the email, save it in your draft, delete it, and then rewrite it again. It's that same approach, right? You gotta get the emotions out. You have to let go of the emotions so you can actually have a good conversation, right?
Yep, exactly. This last one, I thought this was a great article on what jobs are hot and what jobs are not.
Yes.
As people start thinking about their future security career and they kind of want to figure out where to go, this is a great list for people to take a look at.
It is. And I'm going to apologize to Joan who wrote this article because I was tapped to actually contribute to this and I was away on vacation PTO, so I didn't contribute to the article that she wrote. So Joan, I am sorry, but it's very similar to an article that I contributed to for network computing, right, with John Edwards. It was the same question, but for the networking side, the networking world, right? And a lot of what I had come up with is, listen, your traditional networking folks have to change now. They have to become more, software mindset, developer mindset. Because think about it, SD-WAN, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're totally transitioning to more of an AppSec model, right? Versus a traditional networking model. That's one of the things,
right? Hardware engineer is on the not hot list,
right?
Whereas cloud roles are, right? And that's a very obvious change. Yep. What I think, if I read between the lines a little bit, security operations center analyst, not hot, right? I think if you remove the security from that, that's why it's not hot, because you're going to have operations center analysts.
Sure.
I'm really a huge proponent of moving operations outside of security. I don't want security people to be hands-on with the daily operations, right? I think security operations centers are largely going to be operations centers, right? And the security takes on a different role.
But the other side of that too is I think we could get a little bit more refined in that, because a lot of those tier 1, tier 2s are just going to fall victim of automation and orchestration.
Yes.
Now you're getting into the subject matter experts, the technical directors, the operations center directors, a little bit more of that knowledge share that you're still going to need the humans there, right?
Right.
But a lot of those lower tier operations center analysts, same thing in a NOC, right? Your typical L1 engineer, L2 engineer, automation orchestrations.
Yeah.
Doing it.
Going to need less of them, but more of the subject matter experts as an escalation point.
Right.
Yeah. So
it's level up your skill set, because you're still going to need that higher level skill set.
You're not getting involved until stuff hits the fan.
Right. Basically. That's it. Right. And cloud roles, obviously. I mean,
data center security manager is certainly shouldn't surprise anyone.
Right.
But I think the operations role in general is going to morph and shift, especially as we see things like DevOps and development teams now having the ability to operationalize infrastructure. It's not just a security component anymore. It could be performance. You were going to see morphs away from network into application performance and other things. So this becomes a much broader security analyst role, which is why it's hot. I was a little surprised by governance and compliance, only because we've kind of been through that phase. Maybe it's because we're going to see new privacy regulations or some other stuff coming. But we've already kind of burnt through the governance and compliance guys there for a while. So I was a little surprised by that one. But most of these other ones,
I think it was on the list because we're just foreseeing, at least here in the United States, we still don't have a national privacy legislation nationally, right? It's all 50 states are acting differently, and there's nothing, at least on the radar, that I can see that's going to happen anytime soon. So, and I mean,
not until January 20-something of next year.
Right. But let's not forget. Right? I mean, let's not forget the one of the ones that were on here as hot is the data scientists. I mean, we know in the security world we're inundated with data and telemetry and information, right? So having people who can analyze that data, give us good reporting, give us good visibility and situational awareness, that's huge as well.
Yeah, agreed. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. It was good to get us all back together again.
Great to be back in studio.
Yes, I'm glad. I'll be there with you soon. We got to get all three of us together. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.